Well, hello and welcome to the Brian Crombie Show. I have had two shows about art with my mom, Flora Crombie, who is a incredibly intelligent, bright lady. She studied art in university. She was a docent at the Art Gallery of Ontario. She was a person who took art out of the National Gallery of Art in Ottawa into high schools, into elementary schools, and would talk to students about what the art was all about. And she's someone that I've had the pleasure of going to different art galleries and museums with. And it's a wonderful education walking around with her and having her tell you all about the art. We did a show on Easter, and we did a show on art appreciation. I got a lot of you commenting that it was a fantastic and interesting experience. So I wanted her to come back and, in honor of Mother's Day this weekend, tell us a little bit about art that is all about mothers and where they come from, who the artists are, what they're trying to say, etc. So, Flora Crombie, welcome to the Brian Crombie Show. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for joining us again and sharing with us your art. And I'm going to share the screen, and I'm going to show some of the art and get you to tell people all about what it is.
Well, I wanted to begin with this beautiful mosaic, which dates back to something like 867, I think it is. It's surprising in a way how many of the images of early Christian art show mother and child. And the mother is revered. She's holy. She's almost always shown with a gold circle around her head, a halo image. And this one is particularly brilliant. Lots of gold leaf. Mosaics are made out of tiny little cubes of glass and marble and other rocks of different colors. They're actually set in plaster on top of the wall. And the artists became very skillful. This is almost more or less life-size figure.
Whereabouts is this, Mom?
It's in the Hagia Sophia, which was built actually for the Emperor Justinian in what was at that point in time called Constantinople. It's now Istanbul. It's a fabulous building, probably the height of Roman architecture, still standing today. There's a huge dome set on top of 4 stone piers, and then sort of a whole bunch of side domes. And you go in and it's very, very dark inside, but there's these domes that kind of let in shafts of light. And in between, this is one of the apse. This is in one of the apse of the Hagia Sophia. And when you think a building built back in 520, so 30 something, I think it was, is still standing today, it's because of the strength and the viability of that building that we have these beautiful mosaics.
And you're saying that each one of these little colors is a separate little pebble or stone.
Right.
Amazing.
Now, some of them have gold leaf underneath them. Some of them have gold leaf put on top of them. But if you look carefully, you'll see the artist has managed to really give you a feeling of shape. You can see folds in the Virgin's garments. You can see that she is sitting on a chair. You can almost pick up the sides. He's attempted to show you that the chair extends, particularly on our right side looking at it. And the child doesn't look much like a baby here. You'd think the artist had very little idea of what a baby looked like. But again, you can see folds of drapery. There's a lot of kind of sculpturing being done. This was a very, very accomplished artist, probably one who actually worked in different cities. But at that point in history, Constantinople was vying with Rome to be the capital city of the Roman Empire. So this picture sort of dates from that era. We would say it's a Byzantine sculpture, right. And it was probably done 200 or 300 years after the Hagia Sophia was built. I think I've got a date of 867 on it. So
Why are
let's
they
move on to the
both
next
looking off
one.
to their right? Any idea, rather than looking straight ahead?
Sorry?
Why are they both looking off to their right rather than looking straight ahead? Any idea?
No, but you don't feel that they're making direct contact with anybody standing in front of them. I think it's probably just the way he's placed the pupils into the eyes. But as I say, this just sort of gives a shimmering light in a dark interior of this big, big old church, which now is simply a museum in Istanbul.
And you visited it?
I've seen it in Istanbul.
Fantastic. What's next?
Well, we've got to go to Rome, to the Pietà. Michelangelo, and he was fairly young when he did this piece. And we don't often consider what the artist has to deal with, I think. Apparently, he actually went to the quarry and picked out the hunk of marble that he wanted for this sculpture.
Is that one piece of marble?
That is one solid hunk of marble.
Unbelievable.
And I have no idea how you would begin. You know, does he start off with a clay model to give him an idea of how he's going to arrange the figures? Does he do a number of different drawings? Does he actually sketch something on top of the marble? What kind of tools do you think he would use to carve that and get
the chisel and a hammer?
Fabric that looks like fabric, a face that is absolutely beautiful. I mean, she looks like quite a young woman. The figure of Christ across her lap really looks like a live, well, a dead figure, but I mean, it has bones, it has shape to it.
Yeah.
And also when you consider that he's taken a big hunk of marble and carved it down. I mean, if you make a mistake, you can't put it back, right?
You sure can't.
So the skill of the artist in creating a beautiful piece of work like this. Now we're talking 1480, 1490s. So we've come a long way from the old religious mosaic that you saw before. But I think we have to remember that a lot of people didn't have access to Bibles. If they could find a Bible, they probably couldn't read it. Would have been written maybe in Latin by a priest, handwritten, or by a monk. And so the church really used pictures, visual images, or sculptures to tell the religious stories to their people. So let's look at the next one, Brian. And I picked it partly because it is an egg tempera picture, but also because I thought it's very much the same pose as Michelangelo used for his Virgin and Child.
Yep.
Now, when I say it's egg tempera, that was the main way artists painted at that time, and an awful lot of work had to go into that. I had a friend at the National Gallery who was a geologist from Italy, and he was fascinated by the different rocks that artists would use and grind up to get the different colors. Basically, they had to find a red, a blue, and a yellow, the three primary colors that they could blend together. Those just really gave them a powder. And then they had to come up with some kind of a medium to make it into a paint that you could paint with.
What would the medium be?
For years, it was egg yolk. And they actually took egg yolk and beat it up till it was thick, and then used the dried pigment that had been ground up from rocks.
Really? So you're saying that the color we see on this painting is colored rocks mixed with egg yolk and then put on the canvas?
And probably not on a canvas, no. It might be put on a piece of wood, a thin slab of wood. It might be put on a vellum, sort of a heavy type of paper, or it might be put even on a kind of linen. And even that had to be treated before they could start painting on it.
And any idea who the artist is and where this is?
This is Bellini, an Italian artist. Again, around 1490, 1500.
Were Bellini and Michelangelo peers?
Sorry?
Bellini and Michelangelo, were they peers? Were they around the same time?
Close to the same. They would overlap.
Did they work together or were they competitors?
Oh, there were all kinds of Italian artists at that time, both sculptors and artists. But this one, as I say, particularly appealed to me because I thought it's a really quite a lovely picture again of a mother and child. Her hands look almost as if they're in prayer.
Yep.
They put a lot of symbolism in it. Do you notice there's a raven up in the tree there to the left?
Yep.
Is that foretelling doom and gloom for this baby? And on the right-hand side, we have a typical Italian hill town. So the artist made no attempt to put the Virgin and Child into the Holy Land. For him, they belonged in Italy. And this is the Italian countryside that we're looking at. We've got animals. We've got another probably shepherd or something back in the background. A fence, a very primitive kind of fence that I guess is controlling the animals into a pasture of some kind. And some lovely clouds in the sky. But egg temper was a very hard medium to work with because it dried up very quickly. So they could only work on a small bit of it at once. And this is why so many of these artists needed a whole workshop of people working with them who would be mixing up the paints for them.
Oh, really?
So let's move on to the Botticelli. It's next. Yeah. This is a little bit later, although Botticelli worked probably at the same time as Michelangelo because he did some of the decoration of the Sistine Chapel.
Oh, did he really?
And I'm not sure whether this is an egg tempera or not, because by the middle or towards the end of the 1450s, 1460s, oil paints were used. The Van Eyck brothers from the sort of Flemish Northlands of Europe had come up with a method of using the same pigments, the ground up rocks or stones, but they used usually linseed oil mixed with it, which gave you a much more luminous, shall we say, kind of paint. You could actually paint layers on top of layers, but a very slow drying. And here again, no attempt to try and place these figures in the Holy Land. They're in Italy. And he's showing you his skill in painting a bit of masonry, shall we say, some sort of a, I'm not sure whether it's part of an arcade, entablature, building behind, and a view out through the space into the distance, a landscape. And I think we've got an angel on the left. And the figure on the left, curiously enough, almost looks as if it has a halo. Interesting hair, different consistency, looks like a wig of some kind compared with what the Virgin has on her head. And even the baby doesn't have hair that looks like hair. It's interesting that they usually show the Virgin in blue and very often with red underneath it. Again, I think these are symbolic colors, but maybe they were very easy colors for the artist to produce. I don't know. So let's go to the next one. And now we have a mother and child. The real McCoy here. This is a beautiful, beautiful picture. Mother and daughter by a woman by the name of Vigie Lebrun. And her maiden name, Vigie, actually her grandfather was Fragonard, who was a famous artist. So she was born into an art family, studied art, went to Paris, learned from the best, But here, talk about the eyes. They are all, both mother and daughter are making eye contact with us.
Yep.
Lovely faces, very tender arm around the mother, around the baby. She's not a baby, she's a child. I think she was supposedly 3 or something at the point that she did this self-portrait. But I love this picture.
So
and I
sort
like
of
the
you're
way
saying,
he's described the fabric. I mean, there's something that looks almost like velvet that she's sitting on.
Mom, are you saying that the artist is doing a self-portrait, and is the artist the child or the mother?
It's her own child. The artist is the mother.
Quite the hairdo.
Quite a feat.
Don't you think the hairdo is quite something else?
Oh, yes. I love it, though. I love the way she's got her chin down almost on top of the head of the child. And I mean, they're really nestled together there. Not much in the way of background.
And looking straight at us, mesmerizing.
Looking straight at us. Looking straight at us, saying, we love each other. We're here for you to admire.
Beautiful.
I bet you recognize this one.
Whistler's mother.
This is Whistler's mother. So we have an American artist here. Now, he left the United States, of course, as so many artists did, to go to Europe to learn a little bit more about art. And he was living and working in England at the time of this picture. And he didn't call that picture of his mother. In fact, his mother was not supposed to be the model for it. But the day that he was prepared to do it, his model didn't show up. And his mother was visiting him at the time. So she agreed she would be the model for it. And he said it was a composition in gray and black. And most of his pictures, he gave musical terms. So this is a composition. And if you look at the way he's placed her off to the right, we would say it's asymmetrical. The sort of weight of the picture is not central, it's off to the right. And in a way, it's balanced by a curtain hanging at the left. And the two are kind of interrupted by a framed picture in the middle. You know, when we look at a picture, our eye really only sees a little bit of it at once. And you have to move your eye, your gaze over the entire picture to take it all in. And you may not realize you're doing it. And usually the artist can kind of control what you look at and make you look from one part to another. And here I think you probably stare, first of all, at the center, at that picture framed in black. I have no idea what the picture is of. But then if you look next at the mother and her bonnet, the white, and then down onto her lap, because your eye is attracted by the white. And then bang, you get the black of her chair, of her dress, and that black line, square, outlining the picture. And then the black is a little bit lighter in the drapery because it has a design in it. It's in folds, and there's a little bit of white pattern on the bottom part of it.
Yep.
But funny that it's come down through the ages as Whistler's mother, when he didn't really want to paint it as a picture of his mother at all.
What's the
study of playing with color and balance.
What's the time period, Mom? And where is this?
Well, I think I got that information written down somewhere.
So was Whistler one of the foremost American artists early on in the United States history?
Well, he was so well known for this particular piece. And as I say, he was one of a group of American artists who went to Europe and really never came back to the States to paint.
The juxtaposition of the prior painting with the beautiful compassion that the mother has versus this
Right.
painting that's got such a stern look. It's kind of interesting.
Well, and with the black and white too, you don't get the same kind of feeling for this. I've got down as 1871.
The warmth of the white and the purple versus the starkness of the black and the white, the bonnet.
Exactly.
It's interesting.
I think that one is in the, there's a nice art gallery in Massachusetts. I think it's called William and Mary. I've actually visited it, and I'm pretty sure that that's where that is. And Whistler did come from the New England states. His dates were 1834 to 1903, but I don't have a note about where it is, but I'm pretty sure that that's where it is, that it ended up in the New England states somewhere.
Okay.
Now we get into my very favorite period of art. I love the Impressionists. And this is probably, well, early Impressionism.
This is close to realism. I'm surprised you call it Impressionism. Why Impressionism?
This is called The Cradle, and is by a woman by the name of Berthe Morisot. And this woman, I think, is her niece, and she is looking at her own baby, who is, I hope you can see it in the reproduction, in the cradle, but she has a very sheer veil or curtain over her.
Yep.
Can you see I can't on my screen.
Yep, I can see through the veil for the baby.
And the design is very interesting because, again, you've got a lot of black as a background to the right, and you've got a white sort of curtain coming off at an angle. So it makes a nice kind of triangle for the mother to be sitting in. The angle of the curtain going up over the cradle.
Yep.
If you can see it in this reproduction, the curtain on the bassinet is edged in pink, which would tell us that this is a baby girl.
Right.
And this was her first baby. And the story was that she was just fascinated by her, and she would sit for hours by the cradle watching the baby. Berthe Morisot was, as I say, probably very early into the Impressionist group. But this picture was accepted into the very first exhibition that the Impressionists had in Paris, which was, again, 1890 something or other.
So the Impressionist period would be what, 1890 to 19 something?
Yep.
Excellent.
In the 1880s. Now we have Van Gogh's mother. Van Gogh suffered from depression. He was not a successful artist during his lifetime. And he suffered from homesickness. He was at this time living and painting in the south of France. And his sister actually sent him a photograph of his mother, a black and white photograph. And he said it just made him more depressed, more homesick. So using that photograph, he painted this portrait of his mother as he remembered her. And obviously, he remembered her as having beautiful greenish eyes. And he's used the green shade on her face to show the shadows. Now, this is an impressionist technique where he's not trying to show every little hair. He's not trying to be exact with the cap that she's got on top of her head. He's just giving you an impression of it.
But Mom, the eyes are riveting, and it's almost as if the eyes are smiling themselves.
Well, obviously he remembers her with great fondness, and he wasn't at all happy with the photograph. So this is how he managed to translate it into a painting. Now, this was something like 1888. And I think that was the year that he actually cut off his ear in the fit of depression. And 2 years, a little bit more than 2 years later, he shot himself and died. And it wasn't until years later that his art became famous. What a shame.
What a shame.
Those
How old?
beautiful, beautiful, fascinating works of art, and he never lived to see the day.
Any idea how old when he committed suicide?
He was fairly young. I don't have his dates, no.
And who's next?
Now, another American artist, Mary Cassatt. And Mary Cassatt was a very interesting artist. She had no children. She never married. But she loved doing pictures of mothers and children. And this is a particularly interesting one. I think partly because of the viewpoint. We look as if we're up above looking down at it. It's suggested in the write-ups about it. And it was exhibited in Paris in one of the Salon exhibitions. That she was kind of copying a Japanese woodblock. Do you see what I mean when I say we're almost, our viewpoint is elevated, we're looking down?
No, I think we're the father. We're looking down. We came in on Mom bathing the child. And we're standing up.
Mother, this mother is dressed in a suitable outfit to be giving her child the bath. She's not wearing silks or velvets or satins. She's in a ordinary, probably cotton, suitable dress anyway, to be giving her child a bath. The child just has a very simple white towel draped around her. Sweetly drawn, very little suggested in the way of a background. Would appear that we're in a fairly small room, possibly a bedroom, maybe even a bathroom. But a loving picture.
Isn't that a set of drawers behind us?
It looks like it, doesn't it?
So that would suggest the bedroom.
Yep, I think so.
Beautiful.
I like the way the two heads are right together. Whoops, we're into another impressionist. A man this time, Manet. However, here you can really see some of the impressionist feeling for atmosphere. This is called The Station. And it was about 1873. So Manet was almost resisting some of the kinds of things that the Impressionists were doing, but he was also experimenting with them himself. Now, it's unusual in that we're not seeing the face of the daughter. When you think of some of the earlier pictures I've shown you, you couldn't imagine them turning the child around, so you didn't even see her face.
Yeah, for sure.
Mother is sitting there quietly, but she is looking out directly at us, so she's pulling us into the picture. She's making eye contact with us. And she has a tiny little dog on her lap. I thought that was interesting. Now, it's also unusual to have an artist completely cover the picture with the bars of a fence.
Yeah.
It's as if he's blocking us off from the station, from the steam coming from the train, and saying, this is where you are. This is where you're being kept out here on sort of the sidewalk. But look at the action going in behind. The two figures in front are both very still, Again, you've got a hat that this time is very carefully drawn, pleated with a flower on top of it. You can see her earrings. So look at the hairdo of the little girl.
Both redheads.
And she's got a ribbon tied around her hair, and she's got earrings. And a lovely white dress with a big blue bow behind it. So as I say, Manet was partly Impressionist, but partly not. He couldn't quite bring himself into the Impressionist camp. But again, I'm drawn to this picture. I like the way Mama is willing to sit there and let her daughter just enjoy looking at the action going on behind. Okay, next. Van Gogh, no, sorry. It's Gauguin. So this is 1898. And again, we have an artist who had a very, very peculiar lifestyle. Gauguin's father was French and his mother was a mixture of French and Peruvian. And when Gauguin was about 3 years old, I think, they decided they'd better leave France because of the French Revolution about to happen. And the whole political scene was disturbing. And they decided to set sail for Peru. And the father actually died en route to Peru. So for 4 years, Gauguin was living in Peru with his uncle until he was 7, I believe it is, and he moved back to France. And he lived with his grandfather at the south of France. Apparently he was a good student, went to school, got good marks, became a bookkeeper, had a successful business career, married, had 4 or 5 children, but he always wanted to paint. And more he was into art, and he wasn't happy with his life in Copenhagen, and he decided he was going to take off to the South Seas and experiment painting the ideal lifestyle, enchantment in the South Seas. So here we've got him in Tahiti, painting a little group of women by the seashore, one of them with a baby. And she's actually breastfeeding the baby there. But he was into blocks of color too, these solid blocks of color. A sort of an orangey red back behind. Figures that are, again, kind of looking out at us, but not welcoming us into the picture at all.
No. What is the orangey red? Is it a sunset or what?
Don't know. He's playing with color. He's really just playing with color. Intriguing. And you wonder, he left a wife and 4 children behind in Copenhagen. I don't think he ever went back to them. I think he died and was buried somewhere in the South Seas. Strange man. Did a lot of intriguing art and did some very different things with color. The cloisonné refers to what people were doing with enamels, inserting blocks of color into an enameled jar or jug or something or other. So in a way, he's echoing that, these solid big blocks of color, and they referred to it as cloisonné.
Oh, really? Okay, what's next? Well, this is interesting. Oh my gosh, abstract.
This is Cubism. And this is Diego Rivera, a Mexican artist who left Mexico at one point to go to France. How many different artists have I told you have gone to France, learned how to paint? He'd already been painting for a while in Mexico. But he did marry and had a child. Diego Rivera married 3 or 4 different times. I think at least twice of them were to Frida Kahlo, which was perhaps his most enduring marriage. But this woman actually gave him a son. And he decided to try his skill at cubism. So here he is extracting the solids of a person into shapes, blocks, and color. Now, if you look carefully, you can tell that she is sitting in a chair.
Yep.
And if you look at the bottom, you'll see that chair has a base. It's kind of a purplish colored base. I'm not sure whether we see any of the top of the chair or not, or whether that's just simply the color back behind to sort of push the head forward into our space. And you can definitely see an arm coming down wrapped around the child. The Cubist period didn't last for very long. You know, there's a sort of saying, shall we, you know, every painting is an abstract. I can paint you a picture of an apple, a beautiful, realistic apple, but you can't eat it. You can't take a bite out of it. So in that sense, every painting is an abstract. But Cubism is an abstract way beyond that.
Yeah, for sure.
However, I threw it in just because it's a different style of art, and it is a mother.
A mother and child, so appropriate for Mother's Day.
Yeah. Next.
Oh my gosh, what the blank is this?
Now we've got Surrealism, Spanish artist Salvador Dali. And it is pretty weird.
The Enigma of Desire, or My Mother, My Mother, My Mother, My Mother.
Now, if you look carefully, you'll see in some of those openings that are not completely openings, he has written, ma mère, ma mère, ma mère.
Oh, really? Okay. What is it that we're looking at?
I have no idea. What do you think it is?
Looks like a skull of some bird.
Salvador Dali usually did have a landscape. I think we could see a horizon line.
Yeah.
And you can see distance. You can see small things way back on the horizon. You can see things closer. And when you look down at the bottom of the painting, you'll see a strange shape, which is the outline of his face, his head.
Oh, really? Okay, maybe.
Can you see that?
Yep.
With his twirly beards, with some pistachios.
Maybe. You can see his eye and see his eyebrow and his frown lines.
And the thing that kind of connects him to the strange shape looks almost like part of the top part of a violin.
Yep.
Now, there was a French poet who could not understand surrealism at all. And he said it's like taking an umbrella and a sewing machine and putting them on a dissecting table. Well, there's your description.
An umbrella and a sewing machine on a dissecting table.
Yep.
Okay.
Totally unrelated. How do we read it? Is that part of the enigma? Now, I should perhaps tell you a bit of his story. He was only 21 when his mother died. And he'd had a difficult relationship with his father anyway. But within months of his mother dying, his father remarried his mother's sister. So his former aunt now became his mother. And apparently that really upset the relationship between father and son.
Understandable.
So possibly that's why, that's part of the enigma in the title of the drawing. I don't know.
Okay, let's go to another one.
Okay. This is a photograph.
Yep.
I'm trying to show you a variety of styles in painting and in art. And even though this is a photograph, it's called The Migrant Mother. And it's a very famous American photograph of a woman who was a farm worker during the Depression in the 1930s in California. And the photographer, who was Francine, I've got her name written down somewhere here. Well, Lang, her last name was Lang, Francine Lang, was sent out to do pictures showing what the Depression was happening to America at that point in the mid-30s. And she saw this woman and was attracted to her. And it was Dorothea Lang is the name of the photographer. So she asked her if it would be all right if she took her portrait, her figure, her photograph. And I guess after thinking about it for a few minutes, she said, sure, yes, she was willing to have her picture taken. But she was sitting inside a small tent with 2 of her 7 children sleeping beside her. And there's something very vulnerable about the backs of their heads and just sort of seeing their necks and the expression on her face. They were starving.
And they're scared of the photographer. They're shy.
Yes, they're shy. They're worried. They're trying to survive on what frozen vegetables they can find out in the field. And she told the photographer that she had just sold the tires off her car to pay for some food for her children.
Oh my God.
Her husband had died of TB just the year before. And because of this picture, and because it was made known, published in papers and magazines in the States, that group of migrant workers did get a grant and food was sent to them. So is a picture worth 1,000 words? I guess this one was.
Well, it's worth a good meal too.
And it's interesting too that because it's black and white, it's even more emotional, more poignant somehow.
That's true. You're right.
I don't think an artist could have captured that painting in color. This is the work of a keen eye, a photographer who saw something that she thought would tell a story, and she snapped it. And it really, in its own way, is quite beautiful.
And focused it in on the right characters. It's not
Exactly.
It's not in too far or out too far.
No.
Beautiful.
All right, next. Oh, Botero. I knew nothing about this artist at all. Artist and sculptor from Colombia. But my granddaughter Lauren went to Colombia on a holiday 2 years ago. And she came back saying, Gran, I want to know some more about this. What do you know about him? So I started looking him up. Very, very interesting. Lauren said that walking around the city in Colombia, there were a lot of different parks. And almost every park had a statue by Botero. And most of them were a mother and child. They're all big, heavy figures. And as an artist doing paintings, his figures are all, we would say, almost obese.
Yep.
Big, chunky. But he said, no, his figures are monumental. And his story is that he was born and brought up in Colombia to a poor couple, probably starved as a child or with very little food, but became interested in art, became successful. By the time he was making these pictures, these sculptures, and we're talking now 1980s, he had amassed a fortune living in Monaco, making bronze statues and lots of paintings as well. Full size, almost life-size figures. And he donated a lot of them to the city where he was brought up. And this is why Lauren said, you'd turn another corner and you'd find a bench, and there in the park, there'd be another statue by Botero. So that's we've got a Mexican and a Colombian to add to our North American stuff. And here is our most modern artist, Micheline Thomas. She is a fabulous painter. She has a Master's of Fine Arts from where? Yale? I think so. And she does portraits of powerful, powerful women. I'm thinking her portrait of Michelle Obama was shown in an exhibition at the National Gallery in Washington, D.C. She's done Oprah Winfrey. She's done Condoleezza Rice. And she uses an interesting mixture of things. Partly acrylic paint, partly enamels. And she likes to use rhinestones. Her mother was a model. Her mother was 6'1" and was modeling when Michelina was a child. She and her brother in Manhattan were sent off to an after-school program in art at one of the local museums. So from the time she was a child growing up, she had an art education. But here she is painting this woman who she's obviously proud of and loves. And the woman is full of life.
Zest for life, no question. Brilliance.
Colorful. And look at the background. I'm not sure whether it is all painted or whether she's actually cut out bits of paper and added them, because it just says mixed media. I think possibly she's just using her skill at creating an active kind of background. But here's a woman, as I say, who is full of energy, full of life, and obviously quite adoring her daughter, who's agreed to paint her picture, along with all of these famous women that she's been making pictures of.
It's almost a sassy look in your eye.
This is 2014. Oh, Eartha Kitt was the other woman I was trying to think of that I had listed as some of the famous women that she had made portraits for. And I wanted to conclude with Mama, one of my favorites here in Ottawa. However, when I started doing research for Mama, I find out that she was actually commissioned by the Tate Modern in London, England in the year 2000. Louise Bourgeois was a very capable sculptor, but is probably most famous for this particular sculpture. It is huge. And to give you an idea of its proportions, our National Gallery is a big building set well back on a busy corner, a lot of traffic going by. So the space in front of it is really quite large, but you don't realize that until you put something like this sculpture on top of it. But it doesn't impede the traffic at all. In fact, when you walk under it, You almost feel that you're going underneath Gothic arches. Mama is 30 feet high. The main part of the body is cast bronze. The bag underneath it, which you can hardly see in this reproduction, is sort of a net bag, is also cast bronze. And it holds 36 marble eggs. So that's why the statue is called Mama. Yeah. We know it's a mother. But it was also made in memory of Louise's mother, who was a weaver, a textile repairer in her father's textile factory in France.
What can you tell me about Louise Bourgeois?
And this statue has appeared here, there, and everywhere around the world. Now, a sculptor can make 7 originals, and then they're supposed to destroy the master. I mean, each one of them is considered an original. And the National Gallery of Canada owns one.
But there are 6 others around the world?
And there are 6 others. And I know that the Tate Modern in London, England owns one. And it is also outside. And the Guggenheim in Spain, the new Guggenheim Museum in Spain, they own one. So there are 3. But as far as I know, the other 4 are always in circulation. And they've been in St. Petersburg, Russia. They've been in Hong Kong. They've been in Osaka. They've been in Seoul. They've been somewhere in South America. Where have they been in South America? On loan, here, there, and everywhere. But I said, you know, it's interesting how it kind of gives a meaning to that space in front of the gallery. When I think of that big square in front of St. Peter's in Rome, Bernini realized that it needed something to kind of define the space. So he created 2 curving arcades of columns on either side. There's like a real space, and then there's a perceived space. And without that thing sitting there, you'd have no idea that there was that much space between the gallery and the street.
Well, it's a beautiful piece. I remember I was there for an event just before Christmas, I think 2 years ago, and took a picture of it at nighttime, and it ended up getting picked up by the Ottawa Citizen and put in their newspaper. But outdoor art can be so beautiful, and it's something that we don't have enough of.
So that's the end of my story about art for mothers.
Well, Mom, thanks so much for taking us through this review of art for mothers and for Mother's Day. I really appreciate it. And a good tribute to you on Mother's Day to allow me to share with the rest of the world your knowledge of art and your intellect. Thank you so much.
But as I say, my favorite period has to be the Impressionists.
Yep. Why?
I like the color. I like their views of different atmospheric components.
And what about the statues? They were some of my favorite. No?
What are your favorites?
The statues from Rome. The Michelangelo and the Bellini.
That's okay. Everybody can have their favorites.
Okay.
Beauty,
well, thanks so
beauty
much.
is in the eye of the beholder.
Thank you so much, and happy Mother's Day to you.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay. And that's Flora Crombie on Art for Mother's Day. Hope you enjoyed that review of some of her favorite pieces that depict mothers. Happy Mother's Day, everyone. Good night.